"Hand me that envelope. You want the truth, here it is." The light above the table caught the tremor in her age-spotted hand as she slid the thick paper across the wood hard. "You lied for 30 years. You think you can outtalk me now?" The chair on the other side scraped, a man's fist clenched, knuckles whitening. "That's not how it was. I did what I had to." A bitter laugh, dry as dust. "What you had to, or what you wanted?" Steely silence, broken by labored breaths. The woman's gaze didn't falter. "Open it, you tell me what's written there." His jaw worked. "You don't want this mess in the open." "We're already in it," she shot back. "Now read it." Her hand slammed down once, flat, final. Suspended in that room, secrets, guilt, and the rustle of exposed memory. Before all that, before the air tasted of betrayal and the wrongs were inked for all to see, she was just an old woman stepping from a prison into the heat of the Mississippi summer. It started with boots stiff from years of neglect, soles knocking loose gravel in front of the faded prison gates. Ada's hands shook as she turned out her pockets, 4 crumpled singles, a faded bus schedule, and the rotary phone number scrawled by a court-assigned social worker she met once. 74 years old and stepping into a world that had spun on without her for half a lifetime. She squinted at the cotton-laced haze rising over the Delta fields, feeling the weight of decades she'd lost. Her sister had cheated her out of their father's land when she was 40, signed it over, promising she'd come back, never did, and Ada spent the next 30 years bouncing between shift work at motels and living in rooms she never owned. "You need a ride, ma'am," called a deputy leaning against his truck, but his eyes swept her jumpsuit and shoes with quick dismissal. "I can manage myself," Ada muttered, folding the paper around her fist. Her flaw had always been an instinctive trust, the kind that looked for good in vipers and kin alike. Her brother Luke played it like a banjo, cajoling and snaring until the land was his. She only looked back once, saw him smiling, her name erased from every deed and memory that mattered. Now she owned something again, or so the official letter claimed. 1 steel-sealed cave, Ozark Foothills, Missouri. Value unassessed. Transfer upon your release. The acting lawyer, a paralegal named Marla, couldn't look her in the eye at the will reading. The rest of the room stifled laughs behind wrinkled hands. No land, no house, just some old contraption and a hunk of stone with a rusted vault no one could open. Ada gripped the keys anyway. In the envelope tucked between title documents and the lawyer's apology was a torn photograph she didn't recognize. An old gumball machine perched on a warped countertop, just visible in the margin, its cracked glass reflecting something behind. On the back, a scrawl, "For what's owed." R.P., not her brother's handwriting. Ada paused amid the snickers, running her thumb over the photo. That hollow in the background, was that the cave? If you've ever stood at a crossroads where everyone expects you to fail and wondered if a single outstretched hand, real or memory, could change everything, you'll want to hear what came next. The directions led Ada down old state roads past half-toppled water towers, the long-burned hulls of cotton gins, and long strips of highway bordered by the unbroken fields of the Mississippi Delta. The bus rattled as it turned off onto a dirt road barely wide enough for 2 wheels. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to look out, watching shadow-soaked trees hang low, Spanish moss hiding birds and ghosts alike. Each bend in the road called forth a piece of her past. The day her mother died in the kitchen with the radio singing Peace in the Valley. The way Luke grinned when he forced her to sign the land over, promising it'll work out, I'll look after what's ours. Never did. At the sign for Miller's Supply, just a slanting sheet of tin nailed to a fence, she stepped off the bus and walked the last half-mile. The woods pressed in, heat shimmering, and her heart hammered from the effort. Breathless, Ada stopped at the foot of an abandoned filling station. Its awning sagged, the windows streaked with dust, but inside, the glass dome of the ancient gumball machine sat untouched beside jars of dead flies and sun-bleached Marlboro ads. The photo was right. The shape in the background was the entrance to a cave, obscured by decades of brush and neglect. Ada reached for the gumball machine, fingers searching around the shaky base. Something inside had scraped the glass. She knelt, unscrewing tiny bolts with her house key. The false bottom, warped but intact, slid open. Her pulse leapt. There, inside a compartment barely wider than her wrist, was a key, old brass, numbered, attached to a yellowing label, Cabin Pendleton. Folded underneath, a second note, 3 words in block letters, sealed for safety. The hunt wasn't over yet. She braced herself. Then, tucking the brass key into her palm, Ada pressed forward into the past. A storm threatened to break as Ada hiked up the footpath, worn low by decades of river floods and the passing of boots. Thunder growled overhead, pressing the stifling air heavier onto her shoulders. Moving through the brush to the rear of the old station, Ada found the low stone opening, the cave mouth marked by carved initials, RP and the year 1963. She hesitated. Her late husband, Richard Pendleton, cardiac surgeon and pillar of the next county's social set, had vanished 3 years before her sentencing. Everyone in town said he died a good man, mourned by 2 different communities, neither knowing the other existed. But a cold ache in her spine warned that he, always working late, always silent, hid so much more beneath the surface. Ada fitted the brass key into a lock half swallowed by rust. The metal groaned but turned. Inside, a dry stone tunnel led not to trophies but to a narrow door, steel, hemmed by concrete. She pushed open the final obstacle. The flashlight threw a narrow beam. Inside, crates stacked on rotting pallets, file folders burst with yellow pages. Ada bent close to examine the largest chest, its lid secured by a chain and another lock. She groped for the code. Was it a date? RP 1963. Her fingers dialed it in. The lock slid loose. She lifted the lid and gasped. Piled inside, gold coins stamped with foreign dates, bundles of cash wrapped in waxed paper, loose stones glittering like unshed tears, and at the bottom, a velvet pouch brimming with diamonds. Ada's knees buckled. Beside the loot, a stack of yellowed binders. On top, a folder marked A. Pendleton for your eyes. She thumbed it open. A letter written in Richard's hand, the scrawl familiar, measured but tinged with anxiety. My Ada, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong. I made choices while moonshadows washed over this cave, choices I hoped would protect us. But the secrets here are bigger than the gold or even the lies I laid between you and a quiet life. If word gets out about what happened here during 62-65, the government will come calling. This site, they used it for more than storing cash. If you want to fight for what's left to you, the law's on your side. If you want to sell, the buyer must be anonymous and fast, otherwise they'll take it for pennies in public domain. That patent for the device, file it now or it'll all be forgotten. Her hand trembled as she read the final line. Forgive me. I had another life you never knew, not to harm you because I was afraid. Tears stung Ada's eyes. She pressed a palm to the chest, feeling the cold certainty of betrayal and wonder all at once. She gathered what she could, folders, the velvet pouch, a roll of bills. In a battered cigar box she found a bundle of war-era photographs. Men in suits clasping briefcases at the cave mouth, Richard in the background, a look on his face she'd never seen at home. Ada's lips trembled. She exhaled hard and sharp. She needed help, but distrust burned in her chest like a fever. The lawyer's office was still housed in the back wing of Pottsville's old bank, marble cracked, window paint peeling. Marla, the paralegal, sat at her desk sorting a tray of envelopes. Her jaw fell open as Ada entered, peeling boots, stained cuffs, and a battered duffel in hand. Ada, did you find the cave? Marla's voice trembled, soft but eager. Ada tossed the folder on her desk. You want to see what Richard left me? Marla's eyes ran over the gold coins, the faded photos, the marked folders. Where did this all come from? He left more than memories, found it all where his worthless inheritance was supposed to be. Ada's gaze narrowed. What's a patent worth if it's for a government secret? Marla leaned in, eyes wide. A private buyer might pay millions, but if you wait, the patent expires in 2 weeks. Government agents comb these hills every year now. Once they hear, it's public domain and you get nothing. Millions don't mean much to a woman nobody's believed in 40 years. Ada's voice rasped rough. Marla's fingers hesitated above the documents. We have to move fast. I'll call someone I trust. A journalist friend from college works for the Chronicle. If this is linked to Cold War history, they'll help you sell and protect yourself. Ada nodded, muscles tensing. No press, unless it's what it takes to get the story out first. We'll stay ahead, but Ada, look at this, Marla whispered, sliding a page across. Richard, there's another address near Memphis, and all these account transfers, names you don't know his handwriting. He lived 2 lives. Lightning cracked outside, making the window panes quiver. Ada's finger froze on the page. More betrayals. She forced herself onward. Call your friend now. Marla nodded. The question burned in the back of Ada's mind. Who else would fight to keep her in the dark? The next morning, Ada woke in a room Marla offered in the lawyer's attic, the smell of damp and mothballs sharp in her nostrils. Early, the Chronicle's journalist, Gregson, arrived, short, balding, and carrying a recorder. He shook Ada's hand, firm, respectful. You've got proof of government secrets, Mrs. Pendleton. Ada sat as erect as her spine would allow. Pride flickered for a moment, a candle in the wind. You think I'd come all this way for a fairy tale? He grinned. Ma'am, I've seen fairy tales. They don't come with velvet sacks of diamonds. How do I start? Ada's voice had an edge. From the cave, you show me. Then I tell you how many agencies will want in. We need to document fast. Your patent deadline is iron. Can you trust me? Ada's jaw set. I'll trust your story, not your smile. They drove in Marla's old sedan, Ada clutching the chest tight. Each mile, the questions turned over in her mind, about Richard, about the other addresses, all those shifting transfers. By midday, the trio was back at the cave. Gregson snapped photos of every corner, every mark. This is bigger than I thought. I'll need your permission to go public. A sound rustled from the woods behind, the crunch of boots. Ada tensed. We're not alone. A voice, low and drawling. You should have stayed quiet, Ada. Nothing worth fighting for in that old hole. Luke, her brother, gaunt but defiant, stepped from behind a sycamore. I didn't sell you out just to watch you get rich now, he spat. Still working a scam. Ada's hands curled into fists. Richard left me with scraps, left you the real bones, and played me for a fool. You weren't supposed to get out, let alone find this. Gregson raised his phone to record, voice steady. Mr. Campbell, you threatening her. Luke laughed, bitter. She's always acting the hero, aren't you, Ada? I just want what's mine, after 30 years of nothing. She stepped between Luke and the chest, heart pounding. Gregson whispered, he can't touch you, not with this on record. Luke's lips curled. You tell your little story, but Richard did worse to you than I ever could. Ada stared him down. Difference is I survived. Marla pressed her arm. Let's leave. Luke only watched, eyes narrowing as Ada gripped the key and marched past. No turning back. That night, Gregson arranged a meeting with his editor by phone, moves now weighed with danger. We need to break this before the government swoops in. If these documents are authentic, you'll have more leverage than you know. Leverage isn't what I want it done. Quiet. Ada looked away, past the moonlit window toward the river's edge. Gregson replied, then we spread the word, not the details. National bylines, but we hold the location secret. You get your sale, your story. Marla jotted details on a yellow pad. You sure this is what Richard wanted? No, he wanted everything locked down, but he never learned secrets kill faster than time. They worked through the night, scanning documents, uploading evidence, sending encrypted emails. At dawn, Marla brewed cheap coffee and Gregson returned with confirmation. Editor S in, but there's one catch, you have to be on record, Ada, first person, you ready? She paused. Since her release, the world shrank to a set of prison routines. Now her name would cover national headlines. "I didn't get this far by running," Ada said. Two reporters from Memphis Chronicle arrived that afternoon, one to photograph, one to record. As Ada spoke her piece, her hands didn't tremble. She named names, showed documents, looked each witness in the eye. At the end, Gregson leaned over. "Ada, you're the spark, just wait for tomorrow's print." She barely slept. Somewhere Luke lurked in the margins, arms crossed, eyes jealous. Richard's memory pressed on her chest like a stone. Within 24 hours, Ada's phone buzzed with texts and calls. Buyers, government agents, historians. But whenever pressure built, each negotiation pressed hard at her nerves. She felt the world trying to claim her story, not just her find. Her brother's number flashed up twice. She ignored it. But the world proved smaller, and darkness sharper than expected. It was a week later when Ada found herself called to a meeting house in the heart of the Delta, a faded white building that once held cotton auctions, now wired for light and sound. The room was cool, the walls hung with sepia portraits of Delta barons and their heirs, their eyes following her as she stepped inside. Gregson and Marla flanked her at the side table. On the far side, Luke hunched, eyes darting. A hush fell as the door clicked shut. Gregson spoke first. "Are you ready, Ada?" Ada nodded, jaw steel. Luke glared at the editor, barely masking his contempt. "Trying to drag an old lady through the mud, huh? Make a circus out of our name." "You did that yourself," Ada replied, voice level. He surged to his feet, waving a folder. "None of you get the right to rewrite what's done. I saved the place after Richard ran. I kept what I could." She cut him off. "You sold what wasn't yours, lied twice over." Marla slid a heavy envelope across the table, straight toward Luke. "The letters say otherwise. Read for yourself, Mr. Campbell." He fumbled with the pages, eyes combing the air for escape. It's her word against a dead man. He never told the full truth. He never would. Gregson read from the second, newly discovered journal entry. "I hoped I'd die before anyone found out about Beale Street, about Margaret and the boys. But if Ada ever sees this, let her know I'm sorry for how I left her with less than she deserved." The truth slammed the room quiet. Ada reached forward, voice cold. "Tell them, Luke. Tell them about stealing Ma's land, making me homeless when you knew the truth about Richard. You wanted me out, wanted me punished." Luke's lips twisted, but words wouldn't come. Gregson pressed. "We've got the records, the bank wires, the old deeds. It's going to print tonight. You have a chance to set things straight or never speak again." Luke's hands shook as he flipped through the last legal page. Ada stood, pushing her chair back. "Hand me that envelope. You want the truth, here it is." The light above them caught every old scar on Ada's hands. She shoved the letter at him, voice box scraping with every word. "You lied for 30 years. You think you can out-talk me now?" Luke flinched as if struck, face drawn, eyes wild. "That's not how it was. I did what I had to." Ada let the dry laughter rattle the room. "What you had to, or what you wanted." He balled his fist, knuckles bloodless. "You don't want this mess in the open." She didn't blink. "We're already in it. Now read it." She slammed the envelope down, hard, the echo lingering over the trembling tension around them. Luke's mask fell. His eyes darted from journalist to lawyer, cheeks ashen. Sweating, he reached with reluctant fingers, tearing the seal with a sharp jerk. He scanned the words as if they burned. "She's got the proof," Gregson said softly. "It all lines up, dates, names, the parallel transfers, Mr. Campbell." Luke backed away. "No, you don't know what it's been, carrying it by myself, everyone thinking she was the victim, but I was left with nothing, Ada. Nothing but lies." Silence. Ada's voice finally gentle, "And I was left with less than nothing, but I kept living." Luke's eyes traced a faraway point as he slid downward in his seat. Journalists recorded every flicker, every stammered breath. Luke's last protest was a mumble only Ada heard. "I didn't mean to break you." He stood suddenly, chair toppling, stumbling out the door. None followed. As the truth bled into headlines and the government's lawyers prepared their responses, the world's gaze turned to Ada, the newly free woman with a secret cave under Delta Earth. Days later, word reached Ada. Luke had been discovered days after the meeting, alone in his workshop. The coroner wrote natural causes complicated by acute stress. The town whispered, but Ada knew sometimes the weight of guilt sealed fates as firmly as iron doors. Outside on the steps of the meeting house, Gregson waited. "Does it help?" he asked, recorder pocketed. Ada smoothed her hands over the railing, eyes on the low silver river winding past cracked levees. "Not much, but it's done." Gregson nodded, respect mingled with sadness. "You want to stay in the Delta." Ada let the mud and memory settle into her bones. "I never aimed for more than a quiet room, never did." She refused the interviews the book offers. She and Marla sorted the buyers. She sold the site to a silent partner rumored to be with the Smithsonian cabin and all. The government paid high, more than the land was ever worth. But Ada kept her own counsel, choosing each contact carefully. The neighbors who once snickered gave her a wider berth. Some greeted with tight nods, others with awe they couldn't voice. Ada spent the months that followed in a low cottage near Greer's Landing, teaching children to read at the county library and tending wild lilies in the yard. Marla visited, bringing iced tea and court updates, sometimes just to laugh at how slow the world seemed now. One Wednesday, when the sun fell fat over the cotton rows, Gregson stopped by with a clipping. Cabin that held Cold War secret, now part of National Park. "Guess the story's really over?" he asked, leaving the paper on her kitchen counter. Ada only smiled. Stories don't end, they just stop needing to be told. Once she stood at the edge of her back porch, listening to distant laughter on the river and the song of a barred owl echoing through the oaks. She had no desire left for vengeance or secrets. What she craved was peace, earned, scrappy, and all the sweeter for coming second-hand. It isn't always the winner who gets to choose their ending. Sometimes it's just the one still standing who gets to write the final lines. If you've waited most of your life for one honest reckoning, let this be your sign. It's never too late to step out of the darkness, one hard-won truth at a time. And some debts can be repaid only by choosing not to owe anything except kindness to yourself. Ada's last days were quiet, but her hands, once so quick to trust and so often burned, found rest at last, folded around nothing that could be stolen. But the world doesn't settle as easily as a closing door. In the deep Mississippi autumn, when the mornings drew chill and her knees woke her before the sun, Ada sometimes caught herself listening for footsteps, Luke's or Richard's, or maybe those she'd never learned to name, voices that had passed through her years like swift storms across the fields. She learned to live with the peculiar ache of unfinished things. One afternoon, as Ada shelved dog-eared paperbacks behind the county library's depleted desk, Marla appeared, arms full of mail. "For you," she said cheerfully, sliding a stack of envelopes over the counter. Among the bills and bland circulars was a single blue envelope marked with a foreign postmark, Zurich. Ada's hands stilled. She recognized the spidery script of the addressee, Mrs. Ada Pendleton, Greer's Landing Library, Miss. She waited until late to open it, waited until the sunset shot bronze daggers through the kitchen and the kettle hissed. Inside was a letter, composed in steady English and crisp turns of phrase. "Dear Mrs. Pendleton, you do not know me, but my father knew your late husband well. After learning of your discovery, I felt I owed you answers. Please accept my condolences and congratulations. Should you wish to understand what happened in '65, you may contact me at the below number. I have the rest of Richard's notes, preserved as he intended." The letter was signed, Sincerely, Dr. Anna Fischer, Zurich. Beneath it, a mobile number and an address, Switzerland. Ada stared, heart rattling like gravel in a bucket. Her fingers squeezed the page. The world, it seemed, had not finished with her yet. A week passed before Ada summoned the courage to ask Marla, "You ever been abroad?" Marla's eyebrows shot up. "Are you thinking of going? You barely go as far as Clarksdale for groceries." Ada shook her head, but her mouth bent up at one corner. There's something just as heavy as gold waiting out there. Answers, maybe a piece of forgiveness. Marla sat, folding herself onto Ada's porch step. If he hid something else, do you want it? Ada turned the blue envelope over and over. Want and need stopped being the same thing years ago, child. But maybe if I know, I can stop being afraid of what's missing. Marla squeezed her hand. You want company, you just say the word. I haven't seen Europe since college, and the cases'll wait. The flight across the Atlantic was equal parts ordeal and marvel. Ada, wrapped in a faded shawl, pressed her nose to the window and watched the clouds unfurl beneath her. The world looked smooth and clean at 30,000 feet, as if old hurts might slide away, replaced by a new and legally binding kind of calm. In Zurich, Anna Fischer met them at the train platform. She was tall, gray-blonde, and sharp-eyed, the kind of woman Ada thought who could have been mistaken for someone's kindly aunt, if not for the edge to her walk. They settled in a sunny office crowded with books and blown glass paperweights. Anna cleared her throat. Your husband, Mrs. Pendleton, was not a villain, he was desperate. Ada sat, hands folded, gaze unwavering. Desperation doesn't forgive a lie. What did he do here? Anna spread out a folder. During the years following the Cuban Missile Crisis, your husband worked with my father, a physicist. Together, with U.S. backing, they built a device that could detect underground atomic tests anywhere in Europe. The cave was a hiding place for their records. After the project ended, the Americans tried to erase every trace. Richard decided to keep the records just in case. He left my father the last copy of the plans. She nudged a sheaf of papers toward Ada. Blueprints signed in Richard's careful hand, edges brittle with age. I always wondered why, Ada whispered. He never let me see any of his work, not once in 30 years. Anna's tone was gentle. He believed it would protect you. Marla scanned the blueprints, eyes wide. Why send this now? Anna moved to the window, watching clouds scud across the Swiss sky. Because everything ends up found, Mrs. Pendleton. I waited until your story broke. I wanted to be sure it was you, not the government, who claimed what remained. Ada's voice trembled, not with anger but resolve. I don't want secrets, I want to let them go. Anna nodded. She handed her a small, battered leather journal. This is Richard's, the last he wrote after your arrest. Ada steadied her breath before she opened it, fingers moving past the places where the ink bled and words stuttered sharp with regret. To Ada, if I could put right what I have broken, I would. I never meant you to pay for my trespasses. I was afraid of the world and of the shadows in myself. I wish I knew how to make you safe. Love, even broken, can be a shield. Forgive whatever you can. Ada's eyes burned, chest tight. She closed the notebook and sat with it a long while, silent. Finally, Marla said softly, You want to leave it here, Ada, or take it home? Ada brushed her fingers over the cover, feeling the strange relief of finality. I'll take it, but when I'm done reading, I reckon I'll burn it. Anna's eyes glistened with her own old grief. That's your right. They parted late in the afternoon, the city shining below them in sharp blue and gold, as if the world could offer something as clean as an apology. Ada returned home with a calm so deep and silent it surprised her. She shared a rare laugh with Marla as they sat in the airport lounge, trading stories of the world's smallest suitcases and worst coffee. Back in the Delta, the days dulled bright and slow once more. Letters arrived, some kind, some greedy, some lost. Ada answered a few, most she let yellow in the drawer. Winter came with frost brittle on the grass. Ada grew accustomed to mornings spent in her patch of dormant lilies, clearing leaves and remembering the names of those long gone. Word soon reached her that the Smithsonian had found nothing of significance in the cabin but boxes of unsorted files. The world, as always, moved on. A letter from Anna arrived after New Year's. Mrs. Pendleton. Your husband's work saved lives, though he never could see it. I hope you find your own way to peace. That evening, Ada sat before her fire with Richard's journal and a tin of matches. The paper caught, curling to black, but instead of ache she felt an unexpected release, a warmth that went further than the chimney's glow. Marla came by to find her humming Peace in the Valley, and the two shared a silent cup of tea as the wind shook the windows and the river sang far away. It might be easy to imagine Ada ended rich, that dazzling diamonds or unearthed gold changed her after so long. But she was never greedy, not at 80. She gave quietly, donating funds to the local school, to the battered women's shelter, to the library, seeing her name nowhere, refusing every offer for praise. When spring returned, tulips and lilies starred her yard. Children came to her porch for stories, and she told them tales of river crossings, of rabbits quick on the run, and of forgiveness slower to grow but longer lasting than any treasure. One afternoon, a small boy with front teeth missing asked her, "Miss Ada, did you really catch a thief and find diamonds in a cave?" She smiled, eyes creasing. Thieves aren't as rare as folks think, but forgiveness, that's the real buried treasure. He giggled, not understanding, but hugged her as he left. Ada patted his head, closing her eyes for a long moment. Years passed in gentle cycles. Marla married, moving north but writing every Christmas. Gregson checked in by postcard one year with a faded snap of a foreign train station. Found another secret, but nothing as wild as yours. Hope you're well, Ada. The Smithsonian sent her a careful letter. Thanks for her donation, her discretion, and an invitation to visit her site any time. She never went. The old ache faded. Each day was enough, sunlight opening between the blinds, lilies nodding in the muddy breeze. On the last morning of her life, Ada rose before dawn, the air sharp as iron. She dressed slowly in the blue dress she'd kept for good, the one she'd worn to her mother's funeral. She made tea, poured 2 cups, one for herself, one for the empty chair that had held every ghost in her life. She watched the gray light stretch over the cotton fields, shadows slipping away like secrets loosed at last. When Marla found her hours later, Ada's hands were folded gently in her lap, the smallest smile resting on her lips. On the kitchen table, beside the half-finished cup, lay a single sheet of paper, her handwriting careful and slow. To whoever finds this, if you've come looking for riches, look somewhere else. If you want forgiveness, take it, especially from yourself. This is my proof the past need not hold you hostage. Make peace with your own story. That's all the treasure I ever had. Ada Pendleton. The town buried her on the bluff above the river in the corner of the old churchyard beside her mother. No monument, just wildflowers and a stone inscribed with her name. The women she'd helped, the children she'd taught, the neighbors who'd whispered about caves and secrets, all passed by, leaving tokens, lilies, sweet gum leaves, notes in childish scrawls. Marla came down from St. Louis and stood at the grave, reading Ada's last letter aloud to the cool wind and the river's song. Gregson sent a column, clipped from a distant paper. Some lives, when finally told, rewrite the history of others, a hero not by glory but by the steady keeping of truth. Ada Pendleton never wanted to be more than a survivor. She became, in the end, something greater, a witness, a penitent, and the quiet custodian of peace. And she was, even as the world moved on and the papers yellowed in archives. There are stories we inherit whether we want them or not. What Ada left was not an untold fortune, nor even the shattering of old lies, but something harder one, the possibility of grace with nothing demanded in return. If you ever find yourself standing at the edge of a long shadow, doubting whether you can set your burdens down, remember Ada. Her life was neither a warning nor a fairy tale, but a testament. Sometimes the hardest forgiveness is the one you give yourself. And peace once earned is never wasted. On quiet summer nights, if you passed her old house and listened very close, you'd swear you heard her laughter drifting with the river, light and unburdened at last. That is how stories end if you let them. Not with a secret, not with a fortune won or lost, but with one last hard truth surrendered, and forgiveness blooming, silent and wild, through broken ground.